Hello, Mel. How are you today?
Hi, Roberta. I'm doing well. Thank you. How are you?
Great, thank you. Mel is joining us from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. She is a Pilates instructor and a good friend of mine. Um, I am really passionate about Pilates. It has been part of my life, particularly for the last couple of years. I had knee surgery back in early 2019, and really a lot of the recovery from that has got me down the path of recognizing Pilates as identifying instabilities and building strength. And especially at midlife, when we are recovering from injury, I realized that it's such an important thing. And I wanted Mel to come here today to speak to us about Pilates, particularly for middle-aged females. So Mel, I would love it if you could just give us a bit of an overview of this sort of stage of our life in particular and how Pilates can play a really helpful part in that.
Okay. Well, let's go into first what Pilates is, because I feel like even though it is increasing in popularity, that a lot of people are still confused as to what it is and may even mix it up with yoga. It seems to be a little bit of an abstract concept. Sometimes the way I see it explained, so one of the ways that I see it explained is moving your limbs from a strong center. So what does that mean? We think core, we think abs, but Pilates is more than just your abs. And even though there's no agreed upon scientific definition of what your core is, you can just really think of it. We call it the box in Pilates. So your torso, okay? So it means that if I am strong and aligned correctly, that I can move my arms freely without my shoulders having to get involved in things that it doesn't actually need to be involved in and overworked and injured, right? Same thing with my legs, that my legs can move independent of my torso because my torso is so strong. My abs are so strong, my glutes are so strong, my hips are so strong that my legs are free to move and my body can hold stability.
Yeah, it's all connected, right? And it was a real eye-opener for me, actually, whenever I was assessed during my Pilates, to really see where you adopt these sort of body positions that really are not serving you and are then causing pain, maybe not in that localized area, but elsewhere in your body. So
correct.
It's a great way to help you realign and stabilize.
And well, I guess what you mean too is compensations, that we start to, the body's smart and we start to compensate for weakness and tightness in different places, and other things take over, which is where the injuries come from.
I know that sometimes yoga can be confused with Pilates. Is there a very obvious or subtle difference there between the two?
A lot of the movements may seem similar on the mat because, of course, yoga doesn't have reformers or towers or chairs. One of the main things is that we don't hold poses. We move from one thing into the other. The most that we may hold is a 10-second hold as a prep for an exercise because we're not ready to get into the full expression of the exercise.
Yes.
But we are, and I know there are different types of yoga as well too. And I think vinyasa is more of a flow kind of yoga that you would, as you advance, you'd be able to flow. It's the same with Pilates in that sense, where the familiarity and the competence, I suppose,
yes,
for want of a better word, as that improves, you can flow more. I think there's an emphasis in Pilates on strength and stability. There is this idea in Pilates of opposition. We find the strength and the stability through that opposition. So it's called a two-way stretch. So basically, if I want to work my core, I keep this still, which means I'm not doing this, right? So I'm connected through here into my upper body, and I'm reaching with my lower body, and then I create that tension. A lovely image that I was once given from one of my master instructors was, you take like a Chinese finger puppet, where you insert your fingers on both sides, and you pull, and you create that tension in the middle, okay? So it is, again, it can be so abstract. Pilates is strengthening while lengthening, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Only a
You can just
Pilates
feel
person
it.
is going to understand what that means, right? But that is the idea. Can you, in a lot of the exercise, in all the exercises, but some are even more obvious than others, can you reach with one part of your body while reaching in the opposite direction with the other part, and then stabilize that way? So you don't take your hips with you when you rotate your shoulders. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that means I'm anchoring a hip while I'm moving my rib cage.
And it does take some retraining, because
It
you know we
does.
can pick up these habits of just moving in the wrong way. Now you did mention there bits and pieces of equipment, of course, which are synonymous with Pilates, your reformer, chair, tower. Can you explain to us briefly, because some people watching this may never have tried Pilates, not
Right.
familiar with these. I know I wasn't familiar with any of them until 2 years ago, so would love to hear your sort of
Sure.
overview of that.
Well, let's take one idea and I'll show you on different pieces of equipment how it applies. How about that? And then maybe, because Pilates can be huge, Pilates can be a lot. I like to use the analogy too of the medical field. You know, you have specializations, whether it's pediatric oncology. Everybody starts with a basic medical doctor training. And from there, you start to go off to, in
Specialized.
Pilates, let's say osteoporosis or lumbar pathologies or pre and postnatal Pilates. There are people who have gone into those sorts of specializations. Now, I'm sure you even found with your own Pilates practice that sometimes it feels like more of a mental exercise than a physical one. Sometimes the coordination, the thinking, the hold this while doing this, you know, it can be a lot for the brain. So you can see just intuitively how that can start to feed into that field of neuro rehab, right?
Yes,
But I'm just going to take the one basic thing and I'll show you the first apparatus that I'm going to show you. And I'm just keeping our focus today on lumbopelvic stability and an exercise that we would do here. And then I will show you its applicability on the reformer and on the high chair that I have set up. Okay. Perfect. So this one, we call it knee folds or pistons or toe taps. Okay. So I am trying to keep my neutral pelvis. This is what Pilates tries to challenge and to strengthen, so that we'll be able to hold this position regardless of whether we are on our backs, if we are on our sides, or I shouldn't say hold, but if to be able to find this position and hold it if necessary. So whether we're on our backs, we're on our sides, we're on an all fours position, we're standing, we're walking. Can you find neutral pelvis? Okay. So I imagine that there's a bowl of water on our pelvis, and if we tip that bowl of water towards our face, I am now in what we call a posterior pelvic tilt. This is a position that we use a lot in Pilates, where my pubic bone is higher than my pelvic bones. And if I roll my pelvis forward again, I'm still now in a neutral pelvis, and my bowl of water remains nice and still. Then, and so one thing I want to point out, neutral pelvis does not mean that my back is completely flat onto the mat, okay? I still maintain my lumbar curve. You can see my fingers peeking out through there. So the other way that we can take the pelvis is into an anterior pelvic tilt, where my ribs now want to flare, which is a no-no, and my hip bones are higher than my pubic bone. So again, a lot of discussions recently, people think just the goal is to try to hold a perfect posture. Not really. We want mobility. We want to be able to move in and out of a position as needed. And this is, again, what Pilates will show you. And perhaps at one point you find it in this supine position, but then you have difficulty finding it in an all fours position. There is just a basic exercise that anybody can do at home. I like to have a prop behind my knee so that we can keep this angle behind the knee, so that we really engage these transverse abdominals. Okay, so we start with the feet on the floor. Take an inhale to prepare, exhale, and float that leg up. inhale to lower, keeping that neutral pelvis the entire time. Because the tendency is as this leg comes towards my body, that I want to curl my tailbone underneath me and go into that position where I was washing water onto my face, okay? But all that I'm doing is I'm taking my body with my leg. I need to keep my body independent of that leg. So I just use my muscles to lift and lower that leg without changing anything in the pelvis, all right? I want to show you something on the wall. So even if you don't have a ball at home, you can use a towel or anything, you know, a cushion from your couch, just to help maintain that knee angle, because this is what goes wrong. We do this. Very, very common, okay? I'm not using anything but my hip flexor and quads here. So one thing that I want to show you on the wall that was inspired by a friend. I was thinking about her today. She was recently diagnosed with spondylolisthesis. And you can Google that one. So you can come to the wall, and this is an adaptation from an exercise that I can do on the tower. Actually, it's called shoulder roll down or parakeet. So I curl my tail under. So notice that I'm taking that water, I'm washing it onto my face. Okay, my pubic bone is higher than my hip bones, and I come all the way up into my bridge. This gives me nice space in my spine, right? And then I can practice my articulation here, which is my ab muscles moving my upper back down, my middle back, my lower back, and my tailbone. And believe it or not, that was an ab exercise, okay? And I've taken my body from a posterior pelvic tilt back into a neutral position. I can also practice those same toe taps in this position. So I've just progressed this exercise here, trying to keep that pelvic stability in a different position, a slightly different position. This is the reformer, and if you think it looks like a bed, it's because originally Joseph Pilates transformed hospital beds into a rudimentary sort of reformer. Of course, it's been refined over the last 100 years to help with rehabbing soldiers who had been injured in the war. So that's why we have springs here. So you can imagine the springs of those beds is what they were first using to help move the arms and the legs of those wounded soldiers. So just now we looked at keeping that lumbopelvic stability on the mat, and then we had that exercise on the wall, which I'll show you on the tower as well when I flip. But here's an exercise that everybody is probably taught when they first start Pilates: leg and straps. Yeah, there we go. So here's the thing. I have my heels connected, I'm reaching, and I'm keeping that neutral pelvis here. You may not be able to see it so well, but I am keeping my bowl of water nice and still. As my legs come into me, the tendency is for this to happen, for me to curl that tail and lift my tailbone instead of keeping that tailbone long. So I learn to move my legs. This is a little bit more challenging because I have this tension here, yeah? But it's also in a way easier because I have the feedback from the machine and I have the support of these straps for the weight of my legs. So here I'm just keeping that neutral pelvis, and then we can advance this into circles. So I do my circles, keeping that tail long, which means that I'm keeping that pelvis nice and neutral, having my ribs connected and melted. I can do a couple frogs. Again, still maintaining that pelvic stability, because you bet your dollar something else wants to kick in. But this is an ab exercise and a hip exercise, even though it might look like legs. I can advance these frogs later on into something called short spine massage. So again, you will see how that pelvic stability gets challenged in a couple progressions. So this is short spine. And you can see just how nice this feels on my spine. But before I get here, I have to be sure that I can keep that pelvic stability, because I don't want to be up here and then be rocking to and fro or tucking or arching my back and hurting myself. So I'm scooping and rolling my spine away long. Ooh, feels so good. All right, so that was just a simple way of demonstrating how pelvic stability can be challenged in Pilates. So I've just converted my reformer into the tower. All it is that I have these mats, these flat mats that I can place on top of my moving carriage. And the tower has different pieces of apparatus sprung from it. This thing that my foot is on is called the push-through bar. This just gives us, I guess, more stuff to play with and to have fun with, but it also gives us different feedback. So we'll go into that. So the same exercise that I just did on the wall, I did it with a bent knee. I could have certainly straightened out my knee. I'm going to do shoulder roll down. I'll do the full thing here. So again, as I push that bar through, I'm thinking of stabilizing through my pelvis, keeping it neutral to move my legs. So I'm not toing and froing with my pelvis to push the bar through. I have to definitely stabilize a lot through here to not arch my back. And then as the bar goes up, I curl my tailbone, which means that I'm washing the water onto my face. I get that articulation into my spine. And then here is where we find that stability needed. So my glutes have to work, my hamstring has to work, and my abs have to work. I'm also, my triceps and shoulders are working to find stability. I kick that leg up, and of course the goal is to not move my pelvis with my leg. So my hips have to stay just as high as where I started. And even just transitioning from one leg to the other takes a lot of concentration to stabilize. And then I can roll my spine down the same way, articulating my upper back, my middle back, my lower back, my tailbone. Once I find neutral pelvis, I push my legs through and then bring it right back up. So just another progression of how we challenge that lumbopelvic stability and progress. This is the high chair. There are a couple of various chairs in Pilates. This particular one, I could remove this back piece, these handles, this extra piece that I'm sitting on, and it might look a bit more familiar. Actually, maybe I will do that and show you again lumbopelvic stability in a different setup on the chair, okay? But again, I like this for a beginner because it just reinforces what's happening in that pelvis. So I have my back completely against this back wall here. I need to press this pedal down without moving. Sorry, it's squeaking quite a bit, without moving my pelvis. So again, here I'm reinforcing that idea of what we did on the mat, of what we did with the straps on the reformer, of moving my legs independent of my torso. So if I were to do this wrong, it might look like this, because I want to get everything else in to help me push my legs down, because I really want to work my legs, right? But it's not about the legs, it's about the belly. Okay, then I keep my pelvis still, and then we change our feet positions as well. And we can challenge this in different ways. I could put a ball between my knees, right, to find that inner thigh connection to sit up even taller. I can come onto my heels. Now these, just so if anybody's looking and they know this apparatus, this is a little bit low for me, but I didn't want to block my face, so I have it lower than I would usually. And again, all I'm doing is keeping my pelvis in neutral against that back wall. So that's the feedback. This will let me know. The moment I feel my back pull away, I know that I've lost my connection and my pelvis has not stayed in neutral. Another variation showing that neutral pelvis is this exercise here. Again, reinforcing what I just found on the back wall here to keep my pelvis still. So my legs are moving independent of my pelvis. Yeah? Other side from the back angle so that you can see something. So notice, hopefully, my hips are level, okay? What happens to a lot of us is we might do this and then press down with everything else but that belly. Do you see how crooked my hips are? And this can be quite a difficult thing for people to find, but this is part of that lumbo-pelvic stability. So I have square hips, my pelvis is in neutral, and I press it down, and nothing should move in my pelvis. So what is this telling me? This is teaching me to really stand on this leg, to be tall, to have great alignment, so that I can keep control of that pedal, sorry. Yeah. And one thing I'd like to mention, a lot of us are working out at home right now. Whether or not we were ever taught formally what kind of form we should be having when we're exercising, it's very difficult sometimes to actually know what we look like unless you make a video. So whatever your exercise of choice is at home, I would suggest that you make a video so that you can look at your form and start to tweak things. As we mentioned before, when things are not lined up correctly, when you're not using your right muscles, that's how injuries occur. So this exercise that I was just showing with my hips having to stay square teaches you, because I mean, anybody who's been taught Pilates or maybe even just gym in a gym sometimes can be surprised that this is what straight hips feel like and not this. So I'm exaggerating a little bit, but let's think about how this applies. This could apply to your stationary lunges. It applies to your reverse lunges. And then the progression, your walking lunges, which is the hardest version of those lunges. So I don't know how to say. Yeah, it can be applied to that as well too. Learning to find what neutral pelvis and what squared hips feel like is super, super important for other modalities of exercise, for life, basically.
Mel, that was a fantastic introduction to the types of equipment you could expect to use, you know, working through from the mat, the reformer, the tower, the chair. Someone watching this who may not have ever heard of these bits of equipment, and that was myself 2 years ago, may think, well, you know, I've got a mat at home. Why do I need to really take it to a studio, pay money to do a workout? You know, I could look something up online. What would you say to that?
I think, first of all, that is a fantastic question, especially nowadays with lockdown and people working out more from Zoom and other forms of virtual teaching. The mat is the most challenging type of Pilates. We have no support. It's usually very open chain, meaning we're not attached to something. The moment you hold on to a bar or your feet are on the foot bar, it becomes more of a closed chain exercise. Now, in life, we're not holding on to things. We are walking. It's open chain for sure, but how can we strengthen if we don't have the right form to begin with? So the apparatus was created to strengthen you to be able to do the mat. The apparatus gives you feedback that you don't get from the mat, right? There's nothing on the mat. We're accustomed to lying on our backs, but I don't think most of us think about whether we're in a neutral pelvis or not if we're on our backs. The moment I put you on that chair, you're going to know if you're in a neutral pelvis or not. Yeah. It gives that definitive feedback, you know. being able to move your legs in that way. I mean, who can do that? Who can move their legs free for all without having the support of those straps on the reformer? So it allows you to get to things that you would not be able to get to so easily on the mat. It gives you the feedback, it gives you the support. Some people just need more support to begin, right?
Yes. No, absolutely. And obviously the core, the pelvis, great places to start. And Mel, a term I've come across is the proprioception within Pilates. And, you know, my interpretation of that is the kind of connection of my mind to my position of my body. But could you talk more in a more informed way to that, to explain to our audience?
Sure. To be honest, I haven't looked it up on a dictionary. I probably should have. But proprioception is having an awareness of where your body is in space. So again, most of us know where our arms and legs are if we're on our back. But if I take you into a forearm, an all fours position, can you find your neutral pelvis? Can you keep your neutral pelvis in an all fours position? Okay. I'll tell you, if I'm in an all fours position and they say do something like donkey kicks, I totally think that my heel is pressing up to the sky. And if I take a video, it's like all the way out here, right? And you're surprised. I totally thought I was doing the right thing, right? And again, that same idea of what are my hips doing? Are my hips square or not, right? And I have been corrected when I first started Pilates, and now as a teacher, when I correct people to square off their hips and they go, that's square?
Yeah. And it almost feels, I mean, it feels uncomfortable, right? It feels like, no, this isn't, but usually it's that discomfort is where you're trying to work through and build up the right stability so that eventually it doesn't become uncomfortable. It becomes natural.
And it doesn't cause an injury because that is your compensatory patterns, right? Kicking in right there, which is why it feels natural to be twisted.
Yes.
Because something is trying to compensate for something else, right? Even a thing like arms up in the air, right? People don't realize when they twist that they're doing all of this, they're lifting everything. So that awareness alone, you know where that becomes important? When you're driving the car, right? Are your shoulders all the way here? Are you letting your ribs flare out? You know, things like that. I drive with, my tendency is to drive with my left because we're in this country. If it was home, it'll be the right, right?
Yeah.
But Pilates has brought that awareness that I drive with this leg up, not on the seat, but it's definitely up. So that hip is always hiking.
Yeah.
And I did not have that awareness before Pilates came into my life.
And now you're consciously trying to adjust that, you know.
Now I lengthen that leg. I forget what it's called, that footrest. There's a fancy name for it. Do you know, next to your pedals on the left-hand side, there's like an extra stationary pedal.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, that's where my foot should be when I'm driving, not up under not on my seat, but as I said, like jamming into the front of my seat, you know, things like that, and slouching, and because this is my tendency again, you know, this is where I think Pilates, that's where the success of Pilates is. It's not for the sake of making these pretty shapes with my body, which is lovely because that feeds into our motivation to want to do more, but has Pilates brought awareness into your everyday life? I mean, if you did an hour or two of Pilates a week, that is such little compared to what else you're doing in your life. How are you moving every day? So if you can bring some of these principles into your everyday life and apply it when you're washing dishes, when you're cooking food, when you're standing in front of the fridge, when you're driving a car, when you're holding a baby, when you're picking up a load of laundry, then that is the success of Pilates.
No, and I do find that morning movement is a great way to do that, even 5-10 minutes where you do connect with your body and, you know, try and bring some of these principles in, and then that starts you off in the right way, you know, for throughout the day. Mel, there'll be a lot of people watching this that will be inspired. They'll want to give Pilates a go. I know in some places studios are open and available and they can do that face-to-face class. If that's not the case for people and their only access is virtual, what advice would you give?
I would say try it. I mean, there are people who have started with mat and totally fell in love. I'll be honest, that was not my experience. I love the reformer, right? And I've posted about this before. If you had put me on the mat and told me to come back tomorrow, I was going to be busy.
Yeah.
So I would say try it. If this has inspired you, and I hope it did, to try Pilates out, try a virtual mat class if that is all that's available. But definitely, if you could try an equipment class in the future or even now, because I guess it depends on where you are in the world and what might be open and available to you, definitely try it. I just recently did a post last week as well too. If you were to start, my preference to start somebody on the equipment. I put them on equipment right away because of the feedback and because I can explain the principles that I want them to bear in mind through those exercises a little bit easier on the equipment. So if you can do that, you'll probably be better off having a couple privates first. And again, just depending on the person, on the body, even the instructor, because different studios have different policies. There are studios that will not allow you to join a group equipment class until you've had so many privates with them, or until they assess you basically and make sure that you can join a group equipment class. Because this equipment is not, you should not just buy it and go home and have fun with it. Okay, you need to be trained, you need to know what you're doing on the equipment. And even as a practitioner, it's best to have some experience before you get into a group class for safety reasons.
Yeah, and it's quite an investment as well. It's highly specialized equipment. And it does sound like, the proprioception that you will develop on the equipment can be then carried to the mat. So
exactly.
The skill set that you pick up there is going to benefit maybe mat workout. So you could mix it up as well.
You should mix it up because, again, the equipment was invented or created to get you stronger to do things on the mat.
Yes.
I think, I don't want to talk out of turn, but I feel like the majority of us like the equipment more. You'd be doing yourself a disservice to stick only to equipment. You should be mixing it up a little bit and just sort of like a gauge of, oh, can I do this kind of class now? Can I get into this position and move my arms and legs on the mat? Or do I need to step back a little bit, get stronger? Let's try it again in a couple of weeks and see if we can now get this. Because Pilates is about shapes. A lot of what I just showed you was a similar shape, a similar part of my body that I was using. Depending on my relationship to gravity, I may have used more triceps or more lats or whatever, but it was the same shape that I made with my body, just in a different relationship to gravity. Again, proprioception, but yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a great way to describe it. It's been really informative, Mel. Thank you. I always love to ask anyone I speak to, because my business is known as Your Healthier Lifestyle, I believe that health really is a journey. It's not a destination. And we're all on our, point in that journey, wherever that might be. What they are doing to progress their healthier lifestyle. So I wanted to ask you, Mel, hopefully it can inspire some of us out there. What is something that you're doing at the minute for your healthier lifestyle?
I am working on mindfulness. Perhaps this is why I've been drawn to Pilates and teaching Pilates. My preference for exercise, for instance, are those 90s aerobics classes and step classes. Like, I just want to bounce across the walls.
Yeah.
But I think there is something about being in this midlife, right? I still want to do those things. Do I recognize that may not be the best thing for me right now? Totally. I have an autoimmune condition as well too. And some of those kinds of things that I used to like to do tend to bring on flare-ups.
Yeah.
So me tuning in a little bit more, trying to be more mindful. That is not my personality at all, but they say what you need is what you don't want to do, and that's what you should do more of. So this is what I am trying. It's even in terms of my nutrition, just trying to be mindful of what might cause inflammation and flare-ups, poor energy, that sort of thing. And then, yeah, trying to find the right balance of Pilates with my other exercise interests. So
yes, Mel, I couldn't agree more regarding mindfulness and body intuition, really tuning into, you know, what we need to nourish our bodies holistically, especially at this midlife point in our lives where, you know, maybe what worked for us a few years ago isn't quite doing it for us now. Thank you so much for today. It's been wonderful to connect. Really appreciated the insights you've shared around Pilates. And I know for a lot of people viewing today, it will have been the first time that they've seen some of this equipment. If anyone wants to reach out to you, Mel, and, you know, learn from some of the other advice that you're sharing on social media, where's the best place to find you?
So the only place that I am publicly right now is on Instagram under the handle Patience and Pilates. There's little underscores between each of those words, but I'm sure if you just punch that in, that the search bar will take you to my my Instagram page. I have totally enjoyed showing you the different equipment and just sharing this passion that I have with you. It has definitely been a journey, and I'm happy. I don't know. I would love if anybody was interested or had any questions, just send me a direct message. I love hearing it all. I love helping. So thank you so much for this opportunity, Roberta.
No problem. I'll put Mel's details in the description to this video. Great to connect. Okay, take care. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.